Now, this is one of the most popular classes because we're not talking about your knife and fork. Simple natural remedies that you can do for the home, because the fact is the body was designed to heal itself, and it'll heal itself if you give it the right conditions. So part of those conditions we looked at, certainly with the gastrointestinal tract, hydration is paramount. Having a good sleep is very important. Eating nourishing food is very important. But I'm just so thankful to God that there are little bits and pieces that you can do to boost healing in the body whenever there's a problem. So I'll just see if I've got, no, I still haven't. Okay, I'll just use this. And as I mentioned earlier, Leviticus 17:11 says the life of the flesh is in the blood. So what does the blood contain for it to be life? It contains red blood cells, and the red blood cells carry the water. The red blood cells carry the oxygen. Oxygen's the most vital element needed for life. Water's the second most vital element needed for life. And nutrients. You cannot heal without nutrients. No wonder the blood is called the life of the flesh. But what the blood also does is it takes away waste. And we are a living machinery, and whenever you've got a living machinery, you've got waste. We just looked at our gastrointestinal tract, and that's one way that the waste comes out of the body. What the blood does is it takes away waste. So the waste that the red blood cell carries away, it can dump into the kidneys to be urinated out, can be dumped into the sweat glands to be sweated out, and can be dumped into the colon to come out there. It's quite an amazing system. And what blood also contains is white blood cells. And your white blood cells, we looked at them yesterday. They're your internal army. So no wonder the blood's called the life of the flesh. And there is a simple treatment that you can do that will increase blood supply to an area. See, what happens whenever there's an injury, the blood tends to sit or pool in that area. And what we need is to get old blood out and more blood in, which is what water can do. Water is the best conductor of hot and cold, and it's the hot and cold that can move blood. And yesterday I gave a story about a little boy, remember his sore finger? So what I want to show you now is why that hot and cold was so effective. So so we're looking at water here. When you apply hot water to an area, it has a stimulating effect. And I think we can all identify with this. When you're a little bit cool and you have a hot shower, there's a tingling, is that right? And that tingling is it's stimulating. And what's it stimulating? It's stimulating blood. Is that better? I think the last person that wore this had a big ear. Is that better? Okay. So when you apply hot water to an area, it has a stimulating effect. And it only takes 3 minutes before it goes from stimulation to slowing down. In fact, some people even fall asleep in the hot bath. Is that right? But if they're a little cool and they get into that hot bath, it's tingle, 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 and then ease down into it. So we're looking at the times because it's the times of getting from stimulating to slowing down that we use in hydrotherapy, in this treatment. So cold. When you apply cold water to an area, stimulating. Has anyone tried their cold shower yet? Good to see. Did you scream? Have to warn the neighbours there might be a bit of screaming coming out of the shower. And I know when I lowered myself into the gorge this morning, there was a little, it's very cold, it's very cold. It's stimulating. And remember I said yesterday, the reason it stimulates is there's a reaction. There's a reaction. If I was still lying in that gorge, I might not even be alive. And that's why so many people died when the Titanic went down. They were in freezing cold water. And I'm sure when they first landed, it was, but they had to stay in the water because there weren't enough lifeboats. And basically their body just slowed right down and stopped. And that's why so many died. And when cold water touches our body knows that, so there's a reaction. And in water therapy, we're using that reaction. It only takes 30 seconds for cold to get from stimulating to slowing down. And that's what we use. And that's why with this little boy yesterday that had that swollen finger, we used 3 minutes hot, 30 seconds ice cold, and we did that 3 times. Now, the reason why you do it 3 times is you are moving blood in a dramatic way. And after 3 times, the body starts to get a little bit exhausted. So you can use it on fingers like I did with this little boy. You can use it on hands. I underestimated how long it takes for tissue to heal when you've had a serious injury like I did falling on the rock. My bones healed, and comfrey poultices certainly zoomed that along in 6 weeks. But the tissues took a lot longer. And so I did alternating hot and colds 3 times in a row, twice a day. Oh, what a difference that made. At first, I couldn't even bend my fingers after it came out of the plaster, even though I was doing this every day. But now, yes, I can. Yes, give me another month or 2 and I'll get it down there. And that's the other thing that a lot of us don't give the body time. It takes time. And in that little book, Ministry of Healing, she says, nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient it seems slow. Can we all identify with that one? My daughter, when she was about 5 years of age, she came to me and she said, Mum, I'm going to grow up in a minute. Now, we know she didn't grow up in a minute. Well, I have to tell you, I want to be better in a minute. But it actually takes more than a minute. In fact, sometimes it takes a lot longer. And I totally underestimated. I just think to myself, this is ridiculous. This was the 8th of December I got this injury, and now it's late March. But that's how long it takes. But as long as there's improvement, you hold on to that. There is improvement. In fact, a month ago, I couldn't touch my little finger. I can touch my little finger now. So there is improvement. And I'm doing the stretches every day. Little by little, the body heals. But what really zoomed the healing along was when I did the hot and colds. So you can do hands, you can do wrists, you can do elbows, you can do toes, you can do feet. I remember it was probably about 10 years ago now, I read a book called Born to Run about the importance of toe striking when you run. And it was out of that book came the barefoot movement. You've heard of the barefoot runners, those thin runners. And this guy, when he was investigating running, he discovered Bibi Bikila. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Bibi Bikila. Bibi Bikila was an African runner, and in 1960 and 1964, he took home quite a few goals. He was a barefoot runner. He just ran barefoot. And if you watch children run, they always run on their toes. And if you were to run on the grass, you will never heel strike. You'll only ever toe strike. And so I was very enthused to get my first barefoot runners, and I started running up and down the hills, and you almost fly up in these thin-soled. But then my foot got very, very sore and it just wasn't healing. So I went to the doctor. I said, I don't know what's the matter with my foot. And he laughed. He said, you've got plantar fasciitis. Now, your plantar fascia ligament is underneath your foot, and I just inflamed it. One of the things I do, we've got a saying in Australia, it's like a bull at a gate. So when I go into something, I go into it big time. So he laughed. He said, that'll take 10 months to heal. So I went home and I did hot and colds. And I could be lecturing for 2 hours, and by the end, whoa, I've got my foot in the air. It's aching. I'd go home and do hot and colds. How long does it take? At the very most, what, about 11 minutes? And I could get 8 out of 10 pain down to about 2 out of 10, sometimes 1 out of 10. There is nothing that brings relief to pain as quickly as those alternating hot and colds. So what's it doing? It's getting massive amounts of water and oxygen and nutrients, taking away the old blood and bringing in white blood cells. In fact, when you think about it, everything we need for healing an area. So you can do the alternating hot and colds again on different parts of the body. We had a lady attend our program and she had plantar fasciitis. She was limping. She said, I've had it for 18 months. Did you hear that? 18 months she's been limping. She said, I've had cortisone shots and that helps for about a month, but then pain comes back. So we did hot and colds on her. We set her up at the table, showed her how to do the first one. You have a kettle, because when your foot is in the cold water, you put a little bit more boiling water in the hot. You've got to keep it nice and hot. Within 2 days, she's walking. Doesn't mean she's healed, but she's getting there. She's getting there. And all you're using when you do this is blood. You're accessing the healing powers that God has put into the body. So we also saw an incredible experience when we were in Melbourne of a young man who had a serious problem. He's only 15 years of age, and he was having accidents from his bowels in the classroom. So how embarrassing for a young man. Now, they'd already done one operation on his anus, but it hadn't worked, and you don't want any more operations in that area, especially at 15. Now, apparently when he had constipation, no problems. If he had diarrhea, he had big problems. Now, that told me two things. His gastrointestinal tract's not working well, and his anal sphincter isn't strong. So he came to our program, and we discovered that he did live on junk food a bit. So, of course, we don't give any junk food. I said, where are you at the moment? Are you in the diarrhea or the constipation stage? And because he was in the diarrhea stage, we gave him some Stipriol, which slowed things down. We got him to sit. It's called Sitzbads. Sitzbads is German for sit. So we got him to sit in the Sitzbads, and we did this twice a day. So basically what you want is the water to cover from probably the belly button to mid-thigh. So we did 3 minutes hot and 30 seconds cold. And we did that 3 times. We did this whole process. He had no accidents at our retreat. And can you imagine what that anal sphincter does, going from hot to very cold, back to the hot to the very cold? It's bringing a wonderful tonic effect. I said to him, now I've got to make a program that is reachable for a 15-year-old boy. And he was so excited about the results that I knew that he would do it. So I said, just do it once a day. While he's at the retreat, he did it twice a day, purely because we could. But I said, when you go home, just do it once a day and do not miss a day. So I knew it certainly would be too difficult to do in the morning before school. So I said, just do it at night. It'll only take you about 10, 11 minutes, and do it before you have your shower and then into bed. I didn't hear another thing. In fact, it was 2 years later that his cousin did our program. She said, "Did you hear about Tom?" I said, "No, we haven't heard a thing." And usually no news is good news. Is that right? She said, "He's totally healed." You see, the doctor said, "I don't want to do another operation," and he didn't want another operation, but what else do you do? She said he stuck to it. He did it for 30 days nonstop, and that's what I said to him. Do it for 30 days nonstop, because every time you do it, it increases the potency. Because our body's got memory. So the next day when you do it, the body basically goes, "Here we go again," and it's ready. It's ready. And so 30 days, you're almost 30 times more potent on the 30th one. I said, do it for 30 days and have a rest. And if everything's working well, possibly that's all you need to do. But if you see any illustrations that that anal sphincter is not as strong, do another month. How simple. Just so simple. We had another lady do our program, and she said to me, Barbara, and she was about 40, she said, "I have a little flap of skin next to my anus. I'm thinking of having it just cut off, simple surgery." I said, "I wouldn't touch it." I said, "Is it causing you a problem?" "No." I said, "Just leave it. What's the old saying? Let sleeping dogs lie. Just leave it." Anyway, 2 months later, her husband rang. He said she had the operation. He said she's in a fetal position on the floor. She can't go out. She can't work. She just groans all day long. What can I do? I said, bring her in. So what we did was we did the sitz baths, and you can get little blow-up pillow to sit on the bottom if someone's very tender in that area. Maybe if someone has hemorrhoids. This is great for hemorrhoids. Anything in that area. So ladies, fibroids, incontinent, men, prostate, kidney, colon, any problem in that area, it has a powerful healing effect. So what we also did with this lady, and you see the problem was she was in so much pain, she's taking painkillers. And what do painkillers do to your colon? Constipated. So it was just this terrible vicious cycle. And at night, what we did is we got a strip of aloe vera gel, which is very soothing, and it contains a growth stimulant. So we wanted to quickly heal that wound. So we put that next to it and put a little pad on that, and it held it there all night. Her husband brought her to us on about Tuesday, and she juiced for a couple of days. We gave her some herbs to soften the stools. And just the hot and colds and the aloe, she did not need painkillers. And when her husband came to take her home, she came out dressed with a smile on her face. He said, "Has anyone seen my wife? This isn't the one I dropped off." Such a simple thing, and yet such a powerful thing. And you can see why it's so powerful, because it moves blood. So what I'd like to look at now is some poultices that can be used in conjunction with the hot and cold. I'll go back to the little boy yesterday where we put a grated potato poultice on, a very tiny one, on his finger. You see, what potato does is it reduces tissue inflammation. And we used it on this because there was a lot of tissue inflammation. But it's also a drawer. It can be great on, say, ingrown toenails. If someone has an ingrown toenail, you do the hot and colds and then put a grated potato poultice on. Don't start trying to cut the nail or do anything until you get the inflammation right down. And so we've seen many people conquer ingrown toenails by just doing the hot and colds. How often do you do it? As often as you need to. Sometimes you only need to do it once, grated potato overnight, wake up in the morning and all the inflammation's down and the wound is healing. So you remember what you do, you listen, you observe, you listen to your body's response, because your body's response is your best guide. In fact, your body can tell you what no man and no doctor and no naturopath and no test can tell you. It's just watching and seeing, and your body will sometimes go, that was nice, and your body will sometimes go, I didn't like that. So you observe. So to make the poultice, we get a cloth. And for the, maybe this is the size you do for a wrist. And then the potato, you grate it and you put it in the middle of the cloth. And if we're going to do it on a inflamed wrist, maybe for a sprained wrist or something like that, do the hot and colds and then put the grated potato on. And the best thing to use is, old sheeting or thin cotton material. So, when the 15-year-old puts his foot through the sheet, perfect sheet to make poultices out of. Then you start tearing them up in sizes. It's good to make a poultice box. Get a box, and then say you got an old sheet, and if you don't have an old sheet, if you go to the thrift store, you might find an old one, but that thin cotton is best. And then you fold the right and the left and the top and bottom over, and now you have a little package about this big. See, that's a nice size maybe for the wrist. And then you cover that with a piece of plastic, and then you'd bandage that on. And again, for all tissue inflammation. If it was an ankle for a sprained ankle, then you'd make that a lot bigger. So a lot of the poultices we do might be about this size, and that size cloth would come to, about this size poultice. So it's good to have a whole lot of sheets all folded up neatly in your poultice box this size, some this size, and some you might even make that size, and that's a good size for a tiny little poultice that you might put on a finger or a toe, and you fold it over, and then it would come to about that size, which is a nice size for fingers or toes. It's great to have it ready in case there is a problem, and then it's already there. How long do you leave it? Usually overnight. And if you take it off in the morning and it still looks like there's a little bit of a problem, then you do it again. See what you're listening, and you're watching to your body's response. So when they brought my little grandson to me, Sonny, he was 3 years old, crying. He'd just trodden on a rusty nail, gone through his little rubber crotch, and I think it went up about, maybe an inch into his foot. So what's the first thing you do? You give him a bath, because he's covered in dirt, because he's a boy. And then I made a poultice, and it was probably about this size. And then I bandaged it on, put his little sock on and put his shoe on, and he went off happy. And then that night, my son did another one. And then in the morning, it looked clean, no redness, no soreness, so they just put shoes and socks on him. By the end of the day, it's getting a little red. So what does that tell you? They do another one. And William did it for 3 nights. That's all he did it for 3 nights, because at the end of the 3rd day, it wasn't red at all. It was starting to heal. So your body will tell you. But after the 3rd night, William brought me the poultice. He said, look at this, Mum. And there were little bits of fluorescent blue almost metal. So the grated potato had pulled the rusty metal out of the foot and cleaned it. So a lady rang me up and she said, my 10-year-old girl's just trod on a rusty nail. It's nearly gone through the top of her foot. She said, we put the grated potato poultice on because we watched your YouTube lecture on poultices, but it's still a little sore and it's still a little red. So I said, take the poultice off and do some alternating hot and colds in 2 buckets, and then put a fresh potato poultice on and ring me up. She rang me about an hour later. She said, no redness, no soreness, and she's smiling. What's the body saying? Yeah. So what you're doing, you always listen and you're watching the body's response. So we have seen many, many cases of treading on rusty nails fixed by just alternating hot and colds and grated potato poultices. Now, a friend of mine, when we were up in the rainforest, he was a little bit of a hippie. He was sickling the grass, those old-fashioned sickles. barefoot. What happens next? It went into his heel. I didn't hear anything else, and 3 days later, one of the guys said, have you seen Chris? His foot's up like a red balloon, and there's a red line going up his leg, and he's lying in bed smoking marijuana waiting for nature to heal. Nature heals if. And he's not listening to his body. Unfortunately, the marijuana was stopping him listening. See, pain has a purpose. Pain is there to tell you, hey, can you do something? And if you don't listen to the first whisper, the body will start screaming. And when it starts screaming, it's doing damage. And that's what was happening here. I said, bring him up. And we did alternating hot and colds. The first hot could not be very hot. You've got to watch what you can do with the person. You've got to read the person. It was almost probably lukewarm. And then we did the cold. And I knew that he could handle a little bit hot, more hot after the cold. We did that 3 times. Then I made the biggest grated potato poultice pie I think I've ever made and put it over his whole foot. And by then he could limp. He could walk a little bit. When he came up, he could not walk at all. I said, come back in a couple of hours. When he came back, the red line's starting to go down. And when I took the grated potato poultice off, it's oozing. That's what you want. You want it to ooze because it's got to heal from the inside out. I did it again, and then I asked him to come back in the morning. And by the time he came back in the morning, the red line's going right down. So what's the body saying? We can do this. Now, if when he came back, the red line's going up more and it's going up more, we just take him straight to hospital. But I've actually never had to do that because we always get a response. And it's like the girl, like William, he just did potato on his boy and that was enough. But this lady, that wasn't enough with hers because the nail had gone in so deep. So you must look at body's response. The response will tell you we're on the right track. And if it's not having an effect, do hot and colds every 2 hours. So you can do that. So you're watching. And if there's relief, the body's saying, yes, we can do that. So the grated potatoes for tissue inflammation, but ginger is for joint inflammation. So remember this, ginger's for joint. And you make a poultice really the same. I like to finely grate the ginger. And grated ginger poultices are great for arthritis. They're great for gout, back pain, very good for back pain. But just a word of warning. Say you have an arthritic knee and you put a grated ginger poultice on. Within half an hour, it'll get very hot. One lady said, it's burning me. I said, well, if it's too hot, we'll just take it off. So you've got to listen. One lady said, oh, no, the heat feels very nice. So what I usually advise is do the ginger poultice for maybe 2 hours in the afternoon and then overnight do a castor oil poultice. Because one lady said, I did the ginger in the morning and then I could bend my knee. It appears that that heat is the poultice pulling the inflammation out of the joint to the skin. Most pain is due to inflammation. If you can get the inflammation down, you're doing very well. And so she did another one in the afternoon. And then she had a shower and did another one overnight. When she woke up in the morning, all the tissue was swollen red and blisters. And she emailed me. She said, what have I done? I said, overdone it. You've just pulled too much inflammation out and it's irritated the skin. I said, you probably can't do a ginger poultice for another week now. What you can do now is potato. Potato will just reduce the tissue inflammation. Some skins react more than others. In fact, one guy said, I just wear it every night overnight. It doesn't hurt my skin at all. So you're listening and you're responding to, because one lady, she showed me a picture and her skin was all bright red and she'd only had it on for a couple of hours. And I said, well, you need to go very lightly with your skin. because the fact is I have not seen that on most people. So that's why, again, you've got to listen. There's no absolute here. There's no, it must be on for so, no. But remember, consistency is the key. So castor oil. So what does castor oil do? Castor oil penetrates deeper than any other oil. And wherever it penetrates, it breaks up lumps, bumps, adhesions, great on scar tissue, great for tumours, fibroids in the uterus, cysts on the ovaries, endometriosis, fibroids, we said fibroids, colon. Let's go to colon now. It can break up constipation. It's very good to loosen that. But I met one lady who conquered her irritable bowel with castor oil compresses. She said, my husband's a doctor. When he told me what I should do, I didn't like the sound of that. So she said, I did castor oil. And she said, and I was able to conquer it with that. Also, underneath the rib, gallstones, it can help to break those up. Round the back to kidneys, it can help to break up kidney stones. So there's a huge amount that the castor oil can do. But it's not a poultice, it's a compress. And as a compress, it can be used again and again and again. So this is how you make it. So you put a little bit of plastic down, and then with the compress, you put several layers. Now, if it's toweling, you might just put one layer. But if it's thin sheeting, I know I do a castor oil on my wrist every night, and I think I've got about 8 layers of thin sheeting on that. So there's your compress. The thicker the compress, the more oil it'll hold, so the more oil can go into you. If you use a paper towel, it'll all just break up. But if you use cloth, you can use it again and again. I've been using the compress I'm using now for, since I left home. No, actually, I made another one in Alabama. So I've been using it for 6 weeks. And then you put the castor oil on, and it'll be like a thick bubble, because castor oil is a very, very thick oil. So I'll show you how to put it on from another angle. So here's the plastic here, and here's the compress. And remember, we've got several layers. The thicker the compress, the more oil can go into you. And then when you put the castor oil on, you only put it on this much. That's all you put on, because it is so thick and it sits up like a bubble, and it'll take probably about 15 minutes to soak through. And when it soaks through, it takes up a little bit more of the area. And then you put it on your hot body, whether it be wrist, whether it be abdomen. When the heat from your body thins the oil, and it'll go out even more. I said to one lady who had breast cancer, I said, have you tried castor oil? She said, I'm not going to do that stuff. She said, it leaked everywhere. And I know what happened. When she poured the oil on, she poured this much oil on. And then it's got nowhere to go, except it's going to start dripping everywhere. And she is right, castor oil, you don't want that through your clothes, you don't want that through your bed. So it's important to appreciate what I'm saying about it's better to put a little less. So my compress now, of course, is totally covered because I've worn it every night. I've been wearing it every night for a couple of months, and I have no pain when I wear that. Now, one of the reasons I'm wearing it is because in the X-ray it showed a little bit of osteoarthritis on my joint here. And I know that there was something happening there because it was sore before I even fell on it. I have no pain if I wear that. And I'm so glad that's all I've got, because remember, when my mother was 51, she was a cripple in a wheelchair. So I'm really happy that that's all I've got. Remember, genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Could you add essential oil? You could if you wanted. Do you have to refrigerate it? No, you don't. I've got a little snap lock bag that I folded up and put it in when I travel. And so I'm just in the habit of putting that on every night. Consistency is the key. So if you have got a bone spur you want to break down, the castor oil will break it down, but you've got to be consistent every night, every night. So easy. I open it, put it on, bandage it on. It takes me about 30 seconds. It's easy. You wear it all day? You could wear it all day. Yep, if you want to. Now, about once a week, I put maybe another teaspoon on. No, not a special kind of castor oil. Any castor oil will do it. But it is true that the dark brown Jamaican is a little bit more potent, but we've seen amazing results even just with the clear castor oil. Well, they don't spray castor oil, so, I think there's not much difference between organic or non-organic. Doesn't have to be in a glass bottle at all. It can be plastic, and plastic's much more convenient when you're traveling, because remember, castor oil doesn't absorb anything. This compress is just a vehicle holding it so that it can go into you and start to break up unnatural formations. I do not suggest taking castor oil by mouth. What a relief. It can be irritating in the gastrointestinal tract, but it's very powerful from the outside. I met a lady that she said 20 years ago I was diagnosed with breast cancer. She said, I was lying in the hospital. I didn't like what they were offering. And a delivery boy came in and she said to him, can I get a lift out with you? She got out and she went to a friend's house by the sea, a little holiday house that she could stay in. And she heard about castor oil and she said, I just wore castor oil 24/7. She said, that was 20 years ago. I don't have breast cancer. Yeah. So the castor oil, little by little, broke it down. If you wear it on your abdomen, you would wear it for at least 5 hours, 5 days a week. Some people, if they wear it too much, it gets the bowels moving too much. But again, you're just watching your body's response. A friend of ours who developed a fibroid, and we were surprised she did because she exercises, plant-based diet, water, she does everything. And we thought, she's only 30. And then we discovered that she's living on a farm next to a macadamia nut farm. And the sprays from the macadamia farm were enough to throw her hormones out. She was rushed to hospital with pain. They did a scan and they found a fibroid that was, let me go to inches, it was probably about 3 inches in diameter. So she decided to go on the yam cream. So tomorrow I'll be talking about hormones, and the yam cream helps balance the hormones. She wore the castor oil compress every night. She said at least 6 nights a week I'd wear it. And she had no more pain, no more rush to hospital. She had another scan, I think it was 4 or 5 months later, and the fibroid had come right down to from, I think it was 3 inches down to 1 inch. So that's the good news. It can break up things. Hexane 3, yeah, but you find most castor oils are fairly safe. You're not ingesting it. So that's castor oil. So another one is comfrey. And comfrey contains a growth stimulant, stimulates rapid healing. And my daughter, whose website is Misty Mountain USA, she sells a comfrey cream that she makes. When I broke my arm, I cut half the plaster off so that I could access it. Well, what they do now is they do 2 parts plaster to allow for swelling, but that allowed me to cut it off. And what I did was I pulverized up the comfrey, and so it comes like almost a soft jelly. And then I put it on the skin, put a cloth over it, and then bandage that on. And I would sleep with that every night. So at 4 weeks, when I had an x-ray, they were quite surprised at how the bones had healed. So that was good news, because at 4 weeks, they have a look, because sometimes the bones don't knit properly, they don't align properly, but they were very surprised at how mine had healed very nicely. So comfrey, it contains a growth stimulant, so that means it stimulates rapid healing in bone, in ligament, in tendons, in muscles, in skin, so any area. So you might have comfrey, and if you do have a comfrey plant, you use the leaves in the spring and the summer, where all the healing properties are going into the new growth, and in the winter, you use the root, because the healing properties go down into the root. The plant usually dies off in the winter. So when I've needed to use it in the winter, I just dig up the root and I grate it very, very finely. Goes sort of almost like chewing gum, because comfrey has a lubricant in it, so it's very good for joint areas. So if you don't have the comfrey, you can get the comfrey cream. Another thing I'd like to talk about is charcoal. And I think every home should have charcoal in it. And charcoal does an interesting thing that nothing else does. It absorbs, and we know there are quite a few things that do absorb, but it neutralizes poisons. And because it neutralizes poisons, it's used in hospitals for filtering dialysis. They use charcoal for overdose cases. NASA uses charcoal to filter water in outer space. NASA uses charcoal to filter air in outer space, because it neutralizes, it absorbs and neutralizes poisons. Now this is called adsorb. Adsorb is referring to something that can absorb and neutralize the poison. So it's excellent to use internally for diarrhea, for vomiting, for any poisoning in the gastrointestinal tract. And it can be used externally for spider bites, bee stings, snake bites, wasp bites. I think you have a few wasps here. You don't seem to have as many spiders, as spiders or snakes that we have. But that's why it's almost a first aid kit in one, is the charcoal. When you mix charcoal with water, it's like mixing dirt with water. So it's a good idea to mix charcoal with maybe some ground flaxseed. That goes a bit jelly when you put water with it. Psyllium's an easy one. You put water with psyllium and it goes a bit like jelly. So you can do equal psyllium and equal charcoal. You can make a little poultice with it and put it onto the area. It's quite amazing if someone gets a bee sting and you put the charcoal poultice on, the pain goes almost immediately. A lot of people travel with charcoal tablets in case they get, they call it a runny stomach or diarrhea. So that's the wonders of charcoal. Every home should have that in their first aid kit. That's right. For bee stings, it's excellent. And another one that I'd like to look at, which I think is almost a first aid kit in one, is cayenne. Cayenne pepper. And one of the reasons cayenne pepper is so powerful, it's a blood stimulant. And anything that stimulates blood is a healer. Because remember, the life of the flesh is in the blood. Even though it's a blood stimulant, there's quite a few things it does. And what it does is it's a blood thinner. So if someone's on blood thinning medication, they can safely stop blood thinning medication and go on to that. If you're at all concerned whether it's just as potent, you can take 2 capsules 3 times a day. And you can buy it in a capsule form, one called Cool Caine. And Cool Caine has, I think it's got aloe vera with it, so it sort of calms it down as it goes through the gastrointestinal tract. So it's a blood thinner. It also, a vasodilator. What's a vasodilator? A vasodilator opens the blood capillaries. So better flow of blood through the body. And what also cayenne pepper does is it strengthens the arterial walls. So it's great for anyone that's had a stroke or a heart attack, cardiac arrest. And because it strengthens arterial walls, it's excellent for anyone with varicose veins because it strengthens the walls of all your arteries and your venous system too. But something else which is interesting, it is an analgesic. An analgesic means it's a painkiller. So to take as a painkiller, you might take the Cool Caine and take 2 capsules 3 times a day. We'll see what that does. You take it for as long as your body needs it. Did you hear that? The lady commented that we shouldn't have spice in our stomach. Well, mustard irritates the lining of the stomach. Black pepper irritates the lining of the stomach. Chili pepper irritates the lining of the stomach. Cayenne pepper heals the lining of the stomach. Did you hear that? In the book Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss, he spends half a page on every herb, devotes 10 pages to cayenne pepper. And he quotes 2 doctors, and one doctor said it's impossible to abuse cayenne pepper. You know what that means? You could take a bucket a day and it won't hurt you, but I don't know anyone that wants to take a bucket a day. And he said it will never cause a lesion. In other words, it will never burn you. It might feel a little hot, but it does not hurt. Because remember what it's stimulating. It's not stimulating nerves. It's stimulating blood. And anything that stimulates blood is stimulating healing to the area. If someone has no feeling in their feet, you can't put their feet in hot water. And if someone has very cold feet, you can't put their feet in hot water, but you can put them to bed overnight with a cane compress on the bottom of their feet. So you get a sheet of plastic about this big. Then you can use kitchen paper, a double layer of kitchen paper. And when you put the kitchen paper on, then you sprinkle a little bit of olive oil on that, just lightly. Because what the olive oil does is it causes the cane to stick to it. So what I'll often do is put my finger in and dot the olive oil. Put your finger in, dot the olive oil. Don't pour the olive oil on because then it's going to leak out all over your socks and your sheets, and that's no fun. So just very light sprinkle with olive oil or coconut oil, any oil, and then you sprinkle approximately half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper per foot. And then what you do is you put the foot straight on top of the cayenne pepper, and then the person can put a sock on it, and then they sleep with that all night. And what that does, remember what it's doing? It's a blood stimulant. So it actually increases the blood supply to the feet. So people with cold feet wake up with warm feet. People with no feeling in their feet wake up with pins and needles. Does it hurt one? That's what neuropathy is, no feeling in the feet. And a lot of people that have had chemotherapy, they have no feeling in their feet. People that have diabetes sometimes lose the feeling in their feet. You can't put that feet into hot water, but you can do that. How often do you do it? The body will tell you. So if you do that every night for a week, you'll want to stand in a bucket of cold water all day because your feet will be so hot. Can you reverse neuropathy? We've seen it reverse with this. So you might do it every second night or every third night. You just watch the body's response. You can, so you put that on both feet, and of course in the morning you discard it, and you can also do it to the thyroid for an underactive thyroid gland. That'll wake it up. But just apply it for about 2 hours in the morning. If you've got an overactive thyroid gland, ice it. How simple is that? If you've got thyroid problems, you can write thyroid and your email, and we'll send you a paper on it which does mention what I have just talked about.